that's the commercial paper market, has witnessed tremendous growth over the years from when FMDQ, along with other market stakeholders, launched the initiative to restructure or revitalize the defunct CP market in 2014. Now, that market over the years has recorded about 3 trillion worth of commercial paper programs registered and 2 trillion in issuances quoted on the FMDQ exchange since 2014. Now, that represents growth of about over 3,000 and 4,000%. And as Mr. Oshikoya said, this period presents an amazing time to actually come into the market where you'll be able to get very favorable interest rates, or at least rates for raising finance. So our goal through this webinar is to sensitize corporate issuers and other key stakeholders within the various sectors of the economy on the incredible opportunity exploring the commercial paper market as a short-term financing option presents to the benefit of not just the issuers, but also investors and the overall economy. Once again, on behalf of the investors, issuers, and intermediaries engagement, education subcommittee of the Debt Capital Markets Development Project, I thank you all for joining us on this webinar and encourage you to assimilate as much as you can from the team of subject matter experts and industry practitioners, ask as many questions as you can manage, and make your valuable contributions, as indeed this session is also for all of us to learn. I wish you all engaging and insightful deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tumi Shekoni. That's a wonderful presentation. I mean, I could note that in your speech, you are proud to announce that since the inception of the CP market, or the resurgence of the CP market in 2014, FMDQ has recorded about 2 to 3 trillion issuance. I mean, that's laudable. And honestly, I could remember back in the days in 2009 when I was still with one of the banks, the CP market was a thriving market. It was a market in excess of well over 5 trillion at the time. Okay, so if you recorded 2 to 3 trillion in 6 years, I mean, it shows the prospect ahead of us. And I'm excited about it. I'm also excited about the fact that a lot more issuers are coming on board. A lot more institutional investors are coming on board. I'm also excited about the framework that your institution has developed around and to ensure that, yes, we do this properly. I would recall that one of the reasons why that market was suspended in 2009, 2010 was because the market abused it at the time. Clearly, you have a lot of work ahead of you. You have a lot on your table. And I believe that we have the right leadership to ensure that this is done properly. We don't want to go back to what it was in 2009 when the central bank decided to clamp down on that market. A lot is expected from you. And we sincerely believe that you will do the right thing. Well done, and thank you for your speech. I'll go to the next speaker. The next speaker is my boss, all right? Is someone that we both worked together in UBA back in the days, I think it was 2010, all right? He was in UBA Capital, I was in UBA Treasury. He's someone that I've respected a lot. Right now, he works with Stanbic IBTC. He's my boss because he's the chairman of the Investors and Issuers and Intermediaries Engagement Education Subcommittee of the DCMD project. He's no other person than Mr. Kobe Bensi Encho. He's the head of Debt Capital Market of Stanbic IBTC Capital. Kobe, you are welcome. I'm sure that you're excited about this. I'm sure that you're looking forward to this because you have been a major, how would I put it now? A major entity or an institution, if you will, in raising, yeah, that's true, in raising a lot of, capital. You've been part of many deals, i.e. the MTN deals, the Dangote deals, the Nigerian Breweries deals, in recent times. So we are privileged to have you speak to us about the short-term financing option Welcome, Kobe. You can go ahead.
Thank you very much, Tosin, for your kind words and compliments. I always say that these achievements are a team effort and not just the result of one person's effort. Yeah, I'm glad that we are here collectively as a market in terms of the stage of development we are in. We are at. It's great to be here to talk about the achievements we've made. Let me just check. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear. Please go ahead. You would need to put up your presentation.
Can you hear me, Tosin?
Yes, we can hear you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman.
Can you hear me?
Loud and clear. I'm sorry about that. Just a minute, people. We will get Mr. Chairman back on track now.
Tosin, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, and I'm sure everybody can hear you as well.
Okay, fantastic. Apologies. And can you see me?
No, I can't see you.
Okay, all right. Don't worry about that. I'll fix that. But if you can switch to the presentation, I'll just talk through that.
Okay.
So I will spend the next 30 minutes or so and effectively taking us on a journey of the Nigerian CP market, which has been an exciting one. And at the end of it, we will have the opportunity to take any questions. And to get that started, I'll just walk through, the brief points that I'll be touching on. So if you look at the, if you move on to page 2 of the presentation, thank you. Yes. So I'll speak a bit about, how we got here in terms of the commercial paper market, the regulations that govern issuance of commercial paper, the benefits that the issuers are basically able to derive from the CP market. And then we also look at what it takes to actually establish a program and then issue, and then some case studies. So if you go on to page 4, which will speak to more the fundamentals. Now I'll spend just a bit of time here, for those that might be new to this. So some of this may sound pretty basic, but please bear with me as we build on that. So firstly, I think commercial paper essentially is it's a form of short-term borrowing, and it enables a company or corporate to be able to raise funding between a tenor of 15 to 270 days, so 9 months. And it is issued in the form of a discount security. So if you think about a treasury bill and how that works, if you want to invest 100 Naira in a treasury bill, you would pay, let's say, 98 Naira. And when the treasury bill matures, you get repaid 100 Naira. And that's how commercial papers work. And, essentially the definition of what a discount security is. So the interest that you receive effectively is the difference between what you invested, what you put in, and then what you get back at the end of the period. It is usually issued clean. So in terms of commercial paper, it is not a secured debt instrument. It is clean. And as a result of that, you will find that most of the issuers of commercial paper tend to be the highly rated corporates or blue chip names. The best way to approach issuance of a CP, and that's what we see most commonly in this market, is it's done under a program. So most of the commercial paper issuers will first set up a program, And under that program structure, they can then very quickly come to market, as and when they need funding. Most of the CPs that we see issued in Nigeria, obviously in Naira, a local currency, but there are a number of issuances that were done also in US dollars. Typically, you can do any currency so long as there is demand for it, and then you've also set up the documentation to cater for it. So that, in a nutshell, sort of in a very basic form, is the definition of commercial papers. Now, if you look at what the regulation and governance framework is, all commercial paper currently is issued under the central bank CBN guidelines for treatment of bankers' acceptance and commercial papers. And on the basis of that, or that being the premise, the FMDQ, which is the primary regulator for commercial paper issuances, has developed its own set of rules, and which is also updated from time to time. The CBN guidelines were initially issued in 2009 and then subsequently updated in 2019. And then on the back of that, we now have the FMDQ rules, the most recent one released in July 2020. And that provides a comprehensive set of requirements and everything that you will need to know in terms of what one needs to do to access the commercial paper market. Under these guidelines, we speak to things like the qualification, who basically is able to access the markets, how much you can raise and for what tenor, rating requirements, investors that can access the market, and so on and so forth. The registration and quotation requirements as well. Now, and following the CBN reintroduction of the rules in 2009, not much happened for a while. And then in 2012, the market suddenly took off and we have never looked back. And we'll walk through that also in the latter stages of this presentation. In order to put together a commercial paper program, the parties that will be required, obviously the corporate or the issuer, who effectively is the owner of the program. Now, most of the commercial papers that are issued on a clean basis and not guaranteed on the back of the borrowers being what we call investment grade. But if that's not the case, it's also possible to have a guarantor, if applicable. And then you have your arranger or dealer. That's the equivalent of an issuing house if you think of bond market terminology. But your arranger or dealer will be the key advisor who would assist you as a borrower to package the program and then to assist you to raise funding under the program. You also have the ICPA, or Issuing Calculation and Paying Agents, and that essentially is a bank function. So it's the entity that would ensure that for the monies that are raised, that is collected and then delivered to yourself, as well as when the CP matures, that each and every investor that subscribed is paid, what is due to them. The ICPA would also have a record or a register of all the holders of the commercial paper. There's nothing that you can do, obviously, without the help of a lawyer. I mean, our lawyers would help us to document the program, and the number of legal agreements that are required. FMDQ as a regulator would review, once the submission is made or regulatory filing is made, and then will approve the program. And then you will need also a central security depository, of which FMDQ has the FMDQ depository. And the role of the central security depository is to maintain custody of the commercial paper securities. I think that's the best way to put it. So that, for every investor that buys a commercial paper, that there is an electronic record of it. And if you needed to sell, then the units will move from your custody to that of the buyer, who also would have an account, with the custodian or the depository. And then obviously the investors, who are the funders, without them, we wouldn't have the market. And, we have pension funds, as well as non-pension asset managers, banks, insurance companies, trustees, as well as the retail investors or HNIs who are investors in the commercial paper space. So this is, in a nutshell, is what the CP market looks like. We can move on to the next slide, please. The next section. Now, to give you a bit of, yes, this is fine. That's page 6. You know, what's been happening in the market. From 2012, when we had zero issuance and zero issuers, today we have about 25 corporates who either have issued or have established programs enabling them to issue frequently in the markets. And there's been a number of factors that's been driving this development. So if we start off first with, you know, where are treasury bills at the moment? Commercial paper is priced off the treasury bill, right, where the treasury bill yields are. And as we are all witnesses to current market conditions, the treasury bill yields are falling to a record low, which means that to borrow in the commercial paper market is an extremely attractive proposition. And as a result of that, we are seeing quite a number of corporates taking advantage of that. If you look at the top left, the graph, histogram that we have there, you would see the growth in terms of issuance, okay? So from about 13 billion in 2012, if you look at 2019, that had grown significantly with 425 billion being issued by year end in 2019. The amazing statistic is that in 2020, even as at the end of October, we have outdone what was achieved in all of 2019. So there's been 690 billion of commercial paper issued in 2020 alone. And we are not even at the end of the year. And we know that there are quite a few issuers that still plan to access the market before the year ends. So this has accounted, the low interest rates regime has helped to drive growth in the commercial paper space. If you now look at the split, who is actually issuing by sector, so that's the bottom left corner, you have a pie chart that shows the split between a number of different issuers. And you see that the space is dominated largely by banks and then by what you call industrials, cement companies, and then also the consumer or FMCG operators as well. Most of them will tend to go for long-term paper in the sort of maturity range of 265 to 270 days. And then a few of them might look at short-term. And the reason is obvious, right? If you're having access to attractively priced funding, you want to lock in for as long as possible. Then on the bottom right-hand corner, we list by, and apologies, it might be a bit difficult for you to see, but this is basically the largest issuers of commercial paper year to date. And you'll see, you know, corporates like, you know, Dangote Cement, Nigerian Breweries, MTN, etc., that are all listed there. The next on the slide 7 and 8 is basically, again, just a listing of all the issuances. We're not going to go through that, but if you get access to this presentation, I think it's a good sort of reference material. But the point I will note there is that, again, in 2020, year to date, there's been 56 different issuances of commercial paper, which has been phenomenal, looking at, you know, kind of where we've come from. Now, let's spend a bit of time looking at the regulation and the governance framework, because that's also extremely important in understanding what it takes to access the market. So the first point we speak to is qualification. Who can access this market? And essentially, it's any corporate that has a 3-year audited financial history. That's a fundamental requirement. And the most current or recent must not exceed 12 months. So, you know, it just speaks to, you know, a corporate that, you know, regularly has its audited accounts published. And then there are other considerations in terms of size. As per the regulatory framework, the minimum amount that, you know, one can issue is 100 million. There's no upper limit. You can issue as much as, you know, there is demand for. And then the tenor has to be between 15 and 270 days. 270 days is roughly 9 months. So that's what we see mostly for the commercial paper that is issued. We spoke also to the fact that the commercial paper operates like a treasury bill. So it is a discount security, which means that, you want to buy 100 naira, you probably pay about 98 naira and you receive 100 naira in return. And that 2 naira represents the interest that you would earn over the period. That interest is required to be paid on maturity and it cannot be rolled over. There is also a credit rating requirement, obviously, to ensure that investors, are protected. For a borrower to access the commercial paper, you must be what we refer to as investment grade, which means you must have a minimum credit rating of BBB minus. You only need one rating to access the market. However, for pension funds, based on their investment guidelines, they do require that an issuer has at least 2 ratings. So you would commonly observe that most of the issuers will come to the market showing or indicating 2 ratings. Some have 2 ratings from 2 domestic agencies. Some would use, 1 rating from an international agency, and then also another from a domestic agency, and both are equally well accepted. We've spoken to the currency point. Most of the issuances we see are in Naira, but you can also raise funding in US dollars, or indeed any currency for which there is demand, and as documented in your sort of program framework. We mentioned that the most common approach adopted by all issuers is to set up a program, because once you have a program set up, what you've effectively done is you have documented your sort of issuance framework, and you've received approval which lasts you for 3 years. So for the ensuing 3 years, you can quickly come to market and then access the market within a short space of time, typically between 3 to 5 days, maximum 10 days if you would like a sort of longer period. But that's why the program is beneficial. It basically just sets you up, it gives you the infrastructure to be able to access the market very quickly when you need the funds. And then there are some other general requirements, that we will speak to. 10 days is the maximum offer period. Indeed, a lot of issuers will do it in a much shorter space of time, between 3 and 5 days. We see institutional investors as well as what we call HNIs, or high net worth investors, who are participants in the market. Retail investors, come in as well. I mean, the minimum amount usually is about 5 million naira. But so long as, that CP meets the credit rating requirements and it's deemed to be acceptable, retail investors can also participate. And then all the commercial paper is to be listed or quoted on the exchange, which is the FMDQ exchange. So this is typically the framework. And if for any borrower that is able to meet this criteria, you absolutely can have access to this market. Now, what are the benefits? I think we've touched on that, but we'll go through some of that quickly. The number one thing is, as a treasurer of a company, you want to be able to have access to different sources of funding. So you want to be able to have access to your bank for overdraft, but having a commercial paper program also means that, you broaden the pool of funds that you would have access to. So that's a key benefit. In terms of cost and pricing, because it is priced over treasury bill, as we've mentioned, and treasury bill rates are at a historic low. That means that you would have access to highly competitively priced funding. And the terms and conditions also are standardized. They are standard and typically less restrictive than most sort of bank bilateral borrowing agreements that you would have been party to. We've spoken to the point about diversification, but that's a key point for, I guess, most corporate borrowers who would need to have access to a wide range of funding. And then it's also easy to access the market, once the program is set up. So these are all key benefits to corporates, and the reasons why every corporate, any corporate that has overdraft funding with the bank should really be thinking about a commercial paper program also. because it really does broaden your range of options. Okay, if you move to the next section, which speaks to establishment considerations. The first thing that we will speak to is just, the roles and responsibilities of the parties, the advisors that you would use. The arranger or dealer is your key advisor who would help you to package this. As you mentioned, it's the equivalent of an issuing house, as used in the bond market terminology, but for commercial paper. And then all the issuances has to be rated. So, the issuer needs to be rated. So your rating agency is also a key participant or party to the transaction. And then the legal counsel to help to put together the documentation that is required and issue legal opinions. Your auditor will need to issue an audit comfort letter. And the purpose of that audit comfort letter is basically just providing comfort to investors that the financial information in the prospectus has been correctly extracted from your audited financials. So what they are seeing is an accurate representation. And then your ICPA, as you mentioned, is a bank that helps you in terms of the collections and payments and ensuring that you have a record of the different parties that own the commercial papers issued. And then your depository, not least of all, would have an electronic record of all the investors, and then will also facilitate any trade in commercial paper. Right, then we can move on to the documentation. Your program memorandum is essentially like your prospectus. So it is the document that describes in detail the borrower's business, which industry they operate in, the management, corporate governance structure, indeed all the relevant disclosure that an investor would need to know to make an informed decision. And we encourage that all investors do read these prospectuses or program memoranda, because I think sometimes what happens is people basically just assume that, oh, if it's been arranged by a Stanbic IBTC Capital and it's been listed on an FMDQ, and you have Banwe Gudalo as a legal counsel, then it means that I don't need to worry about it. But no, it's important that as an investor, you read through the material to ensure that you understand the sort of risk you are taking by investing in the instrument, and then you're also familiar with the borrower's business. The pricing supplement. So once you have the program prospectus that is approved and done, the pricing supplement effectively is like a term sheet that speaks to specific issuance under the program. So for each issuance, it will list out, the details like the amount that is being raised, what is the discount rate or the yield, and then the tenor, etc. So it speaks to the specific terms of each issuance. Mandate letter is what appoints the arranger to put together the transaction. Each borrower would need a board resolution that authorizes them. That's a key authorization requirement. The Icp agreement is the agreement between the borrower and the bank that deals with the payments and collections, as we referenced earlier. A rating report, it speaks to what the rating agency's assessment of the borrower is. So it's also another very important document as an investor for you to review and ensure that you understand the risk you are taking. Dealer agreement is similar to the mandate letter. It documents what the dealer's responsibilities are in respect to the transaction. And then a deed of covenant essentially is a one-way declaration of debt by the borrower. So it's what effectively constitutes the commercial paper notes or securities. So this, in a nutshell, for those that are interested in documentation, is what is required to set up commercial paper program. And then again, just to walk through the sequence. So the first thing you need to do is obtain your credit rating as a fundamental requirement. And then you complete the documentation process, and then you would engage your investors in the market. If you've never been an issuer in the market, you want to have meetings to tell them about your business and intimate them about what you are planning to do. You would file the transaction in order to get your regulatory approvals, and then finally you look to launch the issuance. And all of this, can be completed in a period of no longer than 6 to 8 weeks if you are doing this for the first time. So you're establishing the program first. If you have a program already in place and you want to basically just raise funds, and as you mentioned, it can be done in as quickly as 3 to 5 days. So indeed, it's a very flexible approach or method, for corporates to be able to access funding in the market. The reasons why I should have a rating, and other than it's a regulatory requirement, it basically helps investors to get a better understanding of your business and to be able to place you within the universe of a number of different issuers and benchmark you in terms of where you place. It also, I guess, enhances your capital market access, and then also the pricing that you can achieve. The higher the rating, the more, the cheaper you can borrow, just to put it that way. So these are all reasons why, a rating is encouraged, even if you're not thinking of immediately accessing the market. If you've completed your rating, what that also means is that if you now decide you want to access the market, then you've basically, you have a head start because a significant work stream has already been completed. Let's look at some other critical success factors. If you move on to the next slide, please. Having the right advisors in place is absolutely critical. You cannot overemphasize that point. If you make sure that you hire or you appoint people that know what they're doing, it would ensure that you avoid a lot of pain along the way. Ensuring that you then also put your best foot forward to get the best possible rating you can achieve from the rating agencies. And if you have the right advisors, you usually will get some help in that respect as well. Governance and preparation. So having your board resolution and all other internal approvals in place is key. And then, once ensuring that you also engage the regulators early enough, and you can then get your approval, in a shorter period of time. And then when it comes to structuring, most of the papers that are issued, they follow the same format. They are all senior and secured, so that's fine. But to the extent that what a borrower might be looking at a more bespoke and complex arrangement, is usually a good idea to ensure that you get the structuring right, and then you also then engage the regulators ahead of time, as you referred to earlier. And then once that is done, once you engage investors, you'll be able to come to a landing point in terms of pricing that you can access the market at. I think that covers the essence of the market and what it takes to access the market. In the next slides, what we have are some case studies, and we will not go through all of this. We'll probably just pick a few of them, and maybe let's speak to the issuances done by some panel members that are representing borrowers here. So if we start off with page number 21. Nigerian Breweries program. So Nigerian Breweries was one of the early pioneers in the market, proud to say. And since the establishment of their program, they have issued almost 300 billion in commercial paper. So they have been they have benefited largely, from this market. And we just picked, just sort of, to illustrate the key points around, their issuance. So Nigerian Breweries currently is rated, AA minus and A plus. The program size is 100 billion, and the way this works, is you have the program size, which is like your overall limit, but you can issue and repay and issue and repay as many times as the program remains valid, which is why, for instance, Nigerian Breweries can have about 300 billion cumulative issuance, even though the program size is 100 billion. The most recent transaction that was done, raised about 45 billion, and it was for tenors ranging between 120 to 240 days. we had a wide range of investors that participated. So asset managers, pension funds, and even corporate treasuries these days, rather than invest in treasury bills, they would buy commercial paper as well as individual investors. Stanbic IBTC, I'm proud to say, was one of the advisors, no doubt. If you look at another example, and you go to page 23, and that's by Dufil Premier Foods, also been quite active in the space. Dufil, sets up a smaller program of 30 billion, but then also, cumulatively issued well in excess of that amount. The most recent one that was done was for 30 billion as well, for tenors ranging from 179, 180 days to 270 days. Achieved pricing between 5 to 7. And yes, on the previous example, Nigerian Breweries achieved between 3 to 4% in the most recent issuance that was taken to market. I think at the short end, it was actually 2.2% or something like that at the other end. Yeah. You had, again, your asset managers, pension funds, banks, and then other investors participating. Again, Stanbic IBTC played a role in putting that together. And then we also have MTN that established, 100 billion, and then also issued one of the largest amounts in the market for 100 billion for tenors between 180 and 270 days. A price in the range of 4.9 to 5.95% for the respective tenors. And Stanbic IBTC was a collection and paying agent, but not a dealer on this particular one. And there are other examples. There is, Dangote Cement, which has been, one of the most prolific issuers in the market. And then a number of others that are not listed here, Diageo, Guinness, Nigeria as well. And then a number of bank issuers as well. But I think these will make for good case studies for anyone that's interested in finding out a bit more about what's transpired. So I think that in a nutshell sort of speaks to what we are seeing in the market. It's been a very exciting journey since 2012, when we had the first issuance. We are seeing volumes almost 700 billion year to date, and I'm quite confident by the time we are done with the year, we could be eclipsing somewhere in the region of 1 trillion naira, and that will be significant for this market. The key thing, as you mentioned, is just put yourself in a position where you are ready, put together a program, get your ratings, get the right advisors. And then, when the market opportunity exists, you'll be able to move very quickly to access funding in the market. So thank you very much. I think we can pause at this time to take any questions or indeed any additional contributions from my fellow panel members. Tosin, thank you, and ready to hand it back to you.
All right, thank you very much, Kobe. That was a very detailed presentation and well presented as well. To all our participants, please, we will send the slides to you. There has been one or two requests to have the slides, sent to them. We will certainly do that. FMDQ will send it to you. I'm sure we have all your details. Thank you very much again, Kobe. We will quickly go into the plenary session. All right, before we move to the plenary session though, I would like to just touch on a few things that Kobe had presented, i.e., the definition of commercial papers. He talked about commercial papers being an unsecured note up till the tenor up to 270 days, a zero coupon instrument. That means that you, as an investor, you take your interest upfront. As an issuer, you will have to, make a promissory note to pay back a certain amount, or the principal at the end of 270 days. So basically what he has explained is the maximum tenor for commercial papers is 270 days. And we're going to a few other questions around that. He also shared with us the framework, i.e. the framework surrounding the legal requirement, the regulation and governance, the custody of CP, and he talks about the parties to CP, the issuer, the guarantor, the arranger and the dealer, the investors, both the PFAs and the non-PFAs. And Kobe also touched on the requirements, okay? Who can access the CP market? You must, and what are the requirements basically? You must have a 3-year financial statement, audited financial statement. You must be rated by 1 or 2, rating agencies, depending on which of your investor base you want to tap into. He mentioned also about the currency. Likely what you have listed on FMDQ is still in the Naira currency, but you could also do the foreign currency as well. Then more importantly, touch on the benefits, all right, for the issuer and the benefits for the investors. For the issuer, the benefits, liquidity management, cost and pricing, diversification of sources of funding. All right, you would agree with me, like I said earlier on before, that this is about the best time for any issuer to begin to look at how to reprice their cost structure. He talks about the roles and responsibilities of the transaction parties. We will touch more on that as we go into the question and answer session. He talked about documentation. I think documentation is very key for everybody. I think one of the reasons why a lot of issuers shy away from tapping into the commercial papers market is because of documentation. There's a myth around documentation being a lengthy process. I'm sure when we move into the Q&A session, we will be able to discuss a lot more about documentation and how that has been streamlined, in recent times. Notably, he mentioned something that was really exciting, the fact that the CP market had grown significantly from 2012 to 2019, from 13 billion in 2012 to 425 billion in 2019. That is a significant growth. And honestly, I must say well done to everybody, all the operators, the regulators, everybody that has made this happen, including the issuers as well. And of course, in 2020, in spite of pandemic, in spite of COVID crisis, they were able to deliver 700 billion. You can imagine in 2021, hopefully, if we're able to get the vaccination, all right, right across the world, you can imagine how much we were talking about in 2021. From the top of my mind, I could say in 2021, we could be looking at what, 1.5 trillion. So Kobe, please, you and the other stakeholders, I've given you a target. 1.5 trillion. Anyways, again, we'll go into plenary session, but before we do that, I would like to introduce the members of the panel. We are so fortunate to have with us today the people, or the seasoned professionals that will be discussing the plenary session. Kobe clearly is going to be part of it, all right? I've introduced him already. My name is Tosin Oshunkoya. I am the co-managing partner at Commercial Partners Limited. Okay, and I oversee the investments and asset management business of Commercial Partners. Still with us today, we have someone who has been, I know a lot of these people, all right, because we've been friends and colleagues for a long time. Jumoke and I, we've been friends for well over, a decade. Please permit me when I introduce people and I try to ascribe some sort of relationship, because I am driven by relationship. So Jumoke is someone who is very smart, sharp, very intelligent. I'm not surprised that he's the vice president at FMDQ Securities Exchange Limited. Ms. Jumoke Olanio, you're welcome. She will be talking to us from the point and the perspective of the regulators. Please, you're welcome to the plenary session. Also with us is someone who I met recently, okay? And she works with one of the top 5 legal firm in the country. You would agree with me that just by mentioning the name of the firm, they are clearly at the top 5 league. So with us today is a partner at Bawo and Igodalo, in person of Mrs. Ayotunde Owoigbe. Mrs. Ayotunde Owoigbe, you are welcome, please. Also with us today is another good friend. We've known each other almost close to 20 years. That's about 2 decades. And he likes to bully me a lot. But again, today I am the anchor and I'm going to bully him a bit today. His name is no other person than Mr. Ishmael Nwokocha. Ishmael Nwokocha is the General Manager, Corporate Treasury at MTN Nigeria Communications. Ishmael, you're welcome. Also with us today, all right, we'll be discussing about, especially from—
Thanks, Joseph.
You're welcome. You'll be also with us today is a lady that I met recently as well. All these panelists will be discussing largely from the point of, or the perspective of the issuer. Then Kobe will be discussing from the perspective of the operator. Then we have Jumoke Olani discussing from the perspective of the regulators. So it's important that I make that clarification clear, to everybody. Also discussing from the perspective of the issuer and largely to share their experiences is with me, Mrs. Shola Ismail. Mrs. Shola Ismail is the Head Revenue Management from Nigerian Breweries. Recently, they raised about 100 billion. All right, so you can imagine that our insights and share of experience is going to be productive at this session. Please, you're welcome, Mrs. Shola Ismail.
Thank you very much, Tosin.
So the last person and not the least, definitely not the least, is Mr. Narayan Agarwal. Mr. Narayan Agarwal is the CFO of Dufil Prima Foods. You're welcome.
Thank you, Tosin.
So the last person, I'm sorry to say, who would be sharing or giving us the closing remarks and vote of thanks is a big brother as well. He's the Managing Director of FDHL. FDHL is Financial Datanet House Limited, in person of Mr. Tayo Onodele. Tayo Onodele, you're welcome.
Thank you very much, Tosin.
All right, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for being with us at this session. We will go straight up to the plenary session. But before I do that, I'd like to share an experience with everyone. So you understand that as we go into this session, it's important that we get deep into certain, topics and be able to squeeze out the juice in the commercial papers market. In 2000, I was a treasury officer with a bank, and I was managing the Naira desk of that bank. And the bank, in addition to managing the Naira desk, okay, they gave me an assignment to oversee the commercial papers of that bank. I got an email and documents and approval from the CEO at the time that we're meant to give an institution. And if I mention the name of the institution, now everybody would know. And the institution was meant to raise a commercial paper of about 2 billion Naira, I think at the time. This was in 2000. Later, I found out that the money that was given to them as commercial papers was actually used in buying an oil and gas company. They bought the oil and gas company with that money, later went into the capital market, the equities capital market, to raise an initial public offer. They were able from the proceeds, because having purchased that entity, the oil and gas firm, they were able to approach the equities capital market, and they got massive amounts of money from that market to be able to pay back the commercial papers within the 270 days. So you can imagine there are loads of benefits. I'm not saying that people should go out there to go, we should use commercial papers to buy entities. But I'm saying at the time then in 2000, some people exploited the opportunities of commercial papers, all right, to able to restructure and buy up an entity. So to me, commercial papers have always been some instrument that I think portends a lot of opportunities. And this is why we are having this discussion today, and it's important for us to drill deep into this discussion. So I'll start out with Mr. Kobe, okay? Kobe, tell us please, all right, because it's important that we talk about this. We keep saying that the limit to commercial papers in terms of tenure is 270 days. Is there no way we could extend that to 70 days? Is it possible for there to be a rollover? And is this rollover permissible? I know that in 2008 and 2009, when we had the problems with CP, there were loads of rollovers, and that impacted on the confidence level of investors. One of the questions investors will be asking going forward is, will there be a repeat of rollovers? And when you begin to see rollovers, the message you are sending to your investors is there's a problem somewhere. Are there mitigants in place, all right, that you think we should look at to ensure that we don't have those rollovers? Or are those rollovers even permissible?
Thank you, Tosin. I guess I was trying to figure out from how you started the question and how you landed, whether it was a motivation for rollover or a motivation against rollover, because clearly, as you rightly pointed out, there could be a perception if borrowing is not repaid but rolled over continuously, that there might be a credit issue or a problem. Anyway, but that said, to the heart of your question, the 270-day term limit is by regulation. So there is really nothing that you can do about it unless CBN, the sort of CBN guidelines are changed to extend that. But I think there's also the thinking of commercial paper is meant to be short term. So short term defined or universally accepted as anything less than a year. In this case, it's 9 months. And then once you cross 1 year, you're going more into sort of medium to long term, which is sort of like your bond territory, which is regulated by the SEC. So I guess, having that tenor was a way to clearly demarcate between, which instruments, should come under the purview of the FMDQ as the primary regulator of commercial paper in the market, and then which instruments will remain to sit with the SEC. But yeah, so it's just by regulation. Now, you're also right that the rules do allow for an issuer to be able to roll over. However, if you're rolling over, you cannot roll over for longer than the original tenor of the instrument plus the period for which is rolled over still cannot exceed 270 days. So you can roll over a 90-day instrument for 180 days, okay? But you can't do it for longer than that because then you go over the 270 days. So it's a way to ensure that confidence is maintained in the market, and you don't get that perception, as you quite rightly alluded to, that people may be using this as a way to hide the true sort of financial health. Okay, so yes, it's possible, but these are the sort of parameters that govern rollover. But that said, I mean, it's also possible, for you to repay fully, and then you can come back and then issue a new series.
Thank you, Kobe. That's well clarified. And I'm hoping that our participants would learn from that, and that could restore some sort of confidence in some of them who are institutional investors here this morning. My next question is about the number of investors. We're talking about the investor base right now, because you need to have multiple investor base, let me put it that way, for us to drive the commercial papers market to the next level. When you were making your presentation, Kobe, we could only see a handful of investors that are driving or showing interest but likely at the buy side. So my next question is to Jumoke. Jumoke, please, Could you just share with us, is Jumoke on this call, please? Jumoke, please, could you just share with us how the capital markets operator can get more involved, all right, in the CP market from the regulator perspective, all right, because we can clearly see that the CP market is not as liquid as the other money market instruments, i.e. the treasury bills, or, you know, if you will, you want to go further down or further up the curve to the bonds market. But we need, because we have that responsibility to move the CP market away from where it is right now, to move it to a point where it will be extremely liquid. You have a ready buy and a ready sell market. What do you think we need to do as operators to drive that liquidity in that market?
Thank you very much, Tosin. Good morning again, everyone. So I think there's several things that can be done to improve the liquidity in the commercial paper market. And to be fair, there's a lot of work already ongoing on these various initiatives. I think one thing I will highlight is it's not a responsibility of one party, but a joint responsibility, because each capital market operator or infrastructure provider has a unique, point to or role to play to ensure that there's a seamless and efficient market structure that will support that liquidity. If I speak permit me to start from the exchange perspective and infrastructures. So I speak to your clearinghouses and your depository. Responsibilities or what would be required from us is to ensure we're putting in place technology, market structures and frameworks that support as many participants as possible to be able to access the market. This will speak to you, your initial, when you started your opening remark about how we can improve investors getting into the market. Now, when we put in place what we would call an enabling market structure and all, of course, the necessary supporting elements to that, we empower the other capital market operators to do their own part, obviously, in developing liquidity in the market. If I speak to capital market operators helping that, liquidity will start also from the volume of outstanding securities that are available in the market to be traded or invested. You've made a comparison to bonds and treasury bills and how those markets are very liquid. And the primary factor for liquidity is your outstanding volumes to be able to be traded and to be able to be distributed without creating shocks or breaks in the market. Yes, the CP market has grown significantly over the last couple of years, but of course, that element of the outstanding volume of securities that is available to be invested and traded, we still need to work a bit more on it. I don't see that market as going to necessarily have the same structure as the T-bills and the bonds market, but I do believe it has its own potential to even grow larger, if you would, than that market if the right structures are in place. So how can capital market operators help that? By being very innovative in the structures that are put out there. So yes, we have a lot of the products that come to the market are your generic vanilla structures, but we can't. There's so many other entities, corporate entities out there that need this financing, and perhaps the very generic structures may not fit what they need. So we need the capital market operators to also to put on their thinking hat, put on their innovative hats, and create those structures for them so that they can see the path and the way to come to the market to raise those issuances in the market. This also talks about, or will also cover, how the capital market operators who, the advisors, if you recall Kobe's presentation, you need to have an advisor, who is vast, that can help you with structuring, where you have operators who do not seemingly tick all the boxes that the regulation has put in place, finding structures and putting, advising on, say, credit enhancements and structures that would help them be able to come to the market while they may not tick all the boxes. These are ways that we can increase the primary issuances of the, commercial papers in the market, such that we see more volumes, employing innovative structures like your securitizations, just generally looking at the structure of the business and providing the solution of how they can tap the CP market will certainly help primary markets. On the secondary market space, I'll start with the end, if you would. We have a lot of the wholesale investors in the market currently now because they are aware about the potential and the yields you can find in that market space, which typically is larger than what you'd find in your treasury bills and bonds market. So they're very interested in the commercial paper market. We now need to push further that information and the opportunity in that CP market to retail investors so that they also can tap into that market space. So again, a joint responsibility. We, the market infrastructure, the regulators, the capital market operators, and even the issuers, if you ask me, we now need to double down on education and providing that information as far and wide beyond just the usual suspects of wholesale investors, but also down to the retail investors of these products that is in the market, which seemingly is even a better, investment opportunity for them out there. And I believe we'll see that, massive draw of retail investors into the market. All of this, of course, supported by my first statement by having that core structure put in place where we can support the retails coming on board. I mean, from the capital market operator's perspective, you want to create your access for your retail investors to be very seamless, be your smart tools that they can use, your USSDs that they can use to enter all these investment opportunities, because it's one thing to educate them, but then it becomes a barrier for them to be able to access the investment. Then we're working against purpose. So I think if all of these come together seamlessly, we will definitely see a commercial paper market in trillions, and multiples of trillions of what we've currently already experienced to date.
Thank you, Jumoke, for that elaborate, response to the question. And again, still talking to you, Jumoke, okay, it's important that whatever we take out of this meeting, all right, it's being worked upon going forward. So we don't just put it in whatever, form and leave it unattended to. So still talking about innovation, you mentioned that, first off, you mentioned that it's a collective responsibility. When we say it's a collective responsibility, it's important that we assign tasks and roles for different, stakeholders, to all the stakeholders. But the question is, who is going to bell the cards, or who is going to be at the driving seat for each one of these areas? If you're talking about education and market enlightenment, it must be a responsibility of an identified, stakeholder. If you're talking about innovation, all right, or having, products or offerings into the market that would drive liquidity, it must be a responsibility assigned to certain stakeholders. We should not just leave it in the air. And the reason why I'm saying this is because, and I need you to answer this question, if you will. So for there to be price discovery, because price discovery is also very crucial in fostering liquidity. For there to be price discovery, you must have a two-way quote, a buy and a sell of any particular instrument. As we speak now, Kubi is so excited that yes, he's brought the likes of Dangote, the likes of MTN to the market. But if you go around the market right now, like you want to buy Dangote CP, or you want to buy MTN CP, you don't get it to find at all. You don't find it at all. So that explains to me that there's so much illiquidity in the market in spite of the size that was issued. So what do we need to do as operator, or what do you need to do as a regulator? Who should be in the driving seat to ensure that there's a ready-made market for liquidity, such that people in the secondary market, you mentioned the retail investors. The retail investors will not have access to those instruments if you don't have a two-way quote market. So what's your idea? What are your thoughts around the two-way quote market? Who should drive it? When do you think we should start talking about it? Or when do you think we should have it a setup in the CP market?
Thank you again for that question, Tosin. I think we're very much in the right path. the Debt Capital Market Development Project and FMDQ taking on that responsibility of, being the central project office and project manager was very much for that purpose from the very first conference I think we had in 2014, 2015, to have someone who is driving all the ideas that we put together always at, such seminars, workshops. So, I mean, if we speak to education or this committee who is championing this webinar today, that's one of their responsibilities. And so it's by having it as a committee where you pull together, subject matter experts and experienced professionals in the market and having someone drive it, we've put some focus to it and some responsibility to how that is put out in the market. So, but let me, go on to the other part of your question, which is especially with the secondary market liquidity. Because I do agree with you with the primary market liquidity. I think quite a lot has been achieved. There's a lot of information out there that helps when issuers want to go to market. I mean, if you look at Kobe's presentation, you're able to see the rates at which various issuers have raised funds in the primary market space. With the secondary market space, we now need to create a market space, a marketplace, for promoting the quotation of commercial papers. I can share that there's work already ongoing on that, especially from the FMDQ exchange perspective. And again, it will take working with, which is our typical process, of course, working with all stakeholders in the market, from those in the primary market, because then we now need to bridge how we get it from when it's been issued in the primary market to putting it up on the secondary market module, and then who will have access to that direct module. What are the various liquidity levels we need to create in that market space, if we're going to have market makers, if we're going to have brokers, and then, of course, how do we create the bite-sized options for your retail investors? So all of that is that enabling environment that I talked about that market infrastructures need to put in place, from the exchange looking at what the quotation would look like, to your clearing and your depository functions looking at how they will seamlessly, facilitate the transactions going, speed of light, especially like what you want your retail investors to see. So there is work going on. Yes, there is some responsibility in the sense that with regards to creating a market structure, that's primarily one of FMDQ's mandates, and we're already on it as we speak in engagement with stakeholders in the market. And I believe we'll see that come to fruition pretty quickly. I did want to mention the one last thing, though, on innovation with regards to project structures. I think that's not something that can be regulated or mandated or restricted to one party. Innovation by its nature needs to be as free and flexible as possible, which is where we want the capital markets to be as daring and free and as possible. And that's why at FMDQ we always say, never strike out anything. Please engage us. We will always are very open to discuss, even from the very early ages, to see how it works within the structures and the regulation that we have in the market. Innovation is everybody's responsibility for us to be able to move forward.
Thank you very much, Jumoke. I agree completely with you that innovation is everybody's responsibility for us to move forward this market. In my firm, Commercial Partners, we are the forefront of innovation, having developed an app that allows people to trade, buy and sell government securities. So commercial papers is certainly something that we're looking on to have, onboarded on our hub. So yes, I'm happy about that. Thank you very much, Jumoke. The next question will be to Kobe and Ayotunde Owoigbe. But before then, I'd like everybody to know that there's so many questions that are coming through. I mean, it shows how, interesting and how rich, this conversation is. So please, if you have more questions, please send it through. We might not be able to entertain all questions. For those questions that we think are topical, that we would like our panelists to share and respond to, we will certainly bring them up. But for the rest of those questions, we will be coming back to you via your emails or any of the contacts that you've given to us. So Kobe and Ayotunde, So we've talked a lot about documentation. You would agree with me that one of the reasons why a lot of corporates rush to the banks, all right, seeking for loans and advances, and I'm sorry to say I used to work with a bank, I'm no longer with a bank, but I'm still an investment banker, is the fact that they can easily get that done within maybe 3 days or a week at the most, especially with now that most banks or all the banks are being, I don't want to use the word compelled, but they are being encouraged to lend to the sector, to the real sector. So a lot of issuers would rather go to the banks immediately because they know that that will give them, faster and swift access to funds than coming to the commercial papers market. What do you think we can do to fast track or to quicken the word quick to market in terms of raising money through the commercial papers market, Kobe?
I thought I should have a stab at that first,
Okay.
because it's
right.
documentation focused, but I can add what.
Okay, sure, happy to.
Sorry,
I think.
the honors. Thank you.
Yeah, I think first off to say that I wouldn't approach it from the answer, or I wouldn't approach answering that from, oh, these are the things we can do to make it quicker. I think that might be preempting that the things that make it take time can be very quickly dealt with. Now, I think in his presentation, Kobe talked about the documentation. And it goes without saying that those documents, apart from being required from a regulatory perspective, they're absolutely imperative to have in order to put together a commercial paper issuance. There's absolutely no way that you can do the transaction without having those documents. And the three key documents in terms of in an agreement form, Kobe mentioned them. There's the dealer agreement. He described the role of the dealer. There's no way you're not having that agreement. There's no way you're not having the agency agreement, and definitely the deed of covenant is also mandatory, if you will, because it constitutes the notes, and it's that one-way street by the issuer, as the name suggests, covenanting to pay and to do all that it should do. So I think it's really more of how we have been able to standardize the documentation over time. But regardless of standardization, there will always be discussions. I don't want to say outrightly say, yeah, maybe negotiations, but there will definitely always be discussions because each deal ultimately is different, no matter how much you standardize documentation. So I think, again, other participants might have a different experience, but I think the timing is such that within 6 weeks, you can, if you have all your ducks in a row, if the things that take the long lead time, like rating, if you've had a head start on those or on that, if things like getting your, if there are no issues with your financials, if you do have the audited financials for the past 3 years, and the latest one isn't older than 12 months. If you have those kind of back-end things already done, then it's not the documentation that should take too much time. And I'm not saying it because they're here or because I'm on the subcommittee, but if you do go to the FMDQ with everything that you should, then you do have a very nimble and almost predictable, seamless process for them to review your papers. So I think whilst the banks will always be faster, you mentioned 3 days toasting, they would always be faster. But I think you get the benefit, the benefits of that you think you might lose in time, you get them else how in a CP. You get that in terms of the cost of funding, what the rating does for you, what the fact that you have that diversity or multiplicity in terms of your investor base does for you. I think those are the benefits that you would be looking at and you would pay for in terms of the time that the longer lead time that you might spend. So I think in a nutshell, my answer would be documentation for the CPs is not onerous, has become more standardized over time, and is quickly negotiable and familiar to the regulator. But that regardless of all of that, it will still take some time to put it together. And I think Kobe also talked about the program structure. That helps in the sense that once you've done it the first time, then when you're going back the second time or other times to tap the market, you're not doing extensive documentation all over again. So short answer, documents imperative, they take some time, but on a global or ultimately, you do get the benefit regardless that you couldn't take the bank as quickly as you could take the bank loan with maybe just an offer letter sometimes. Thank you.
Thank you, Ayo. And I think that sums it up, Tosin. I mean, and just case in point, we were able to, under the program structure, raise a CP issuance within 3 days, start to finish, and was for 50 billion. So it is possible to move very quickly if there's the sort of will or determination on the part of all parties.
All right, thank you very much, Ayotele Owegwe and Kobe, for that response. I mean, at this time, I think it's important for us, and it will be a lot more interactive for us to hear from, you know, some of the issuers that have tapped into the commercial papers market to share their own experience with regards to the pricing, with regards to the documentation, with regards to the benefits that they've enjoyed in that market, so that our participants can even hear, you know, first class from, from the people that have enjoyed, you know, that market, okay? So I will start with, I don't know, Narayan, do you want to bell the cat? You want to go ahead and
Yes,
share?
Tosin.
Okay, please go ahead.
Oh, thanks very much. Thanks all the panelists. So I would like to introduce Dufil a bit before I could share our experiences. So Dufil is one of the leading fast-moving consumer goods company in Nigeria, and we are in Nigeria since 1980s. We are the pioneer and the largest manufacturer of instant noodles in Nigeria and Ghana, and we are fully backward integrated company for that line of the last years. We have been able to launch many more products apart from instant noodles, coming to say mention pasta or chin chin or oil and semolina. So that is Dufil, a brief introduction. So as Kobe Jumoke has mentioned that Nigeria is on paper, so Dufil also has benefited from it. We have issued till now amounting to 37 billion naira from 2016 till date, and out of that 15 billion naira we issued in the month of March this year. So and during the month of March, when we were issuing this, so basically we issued this, we raised this money to cater our working capital requirements. At that moment of time, we were contemplating what to go for, whether we should go for foreign currency loans or short-term fundings or overdrafts. So comparing everything, the CP gave us the best option because as Kobe mentioned, it did not take much of time. The program was already established back in 2017, and we didn't the program we established for 30 billion naira. So it took almost only 1 week for us to come out with the issue. So if someone is issuing for the first time, it might take up from 6 to 8 weeks, not more than that, from establishing the program up to the getting the money. So as I was saying, during the issuance in the month of March, because of the LDR being 65%, which was done in Q4 2019, CBN restrictions on OMO investments for individuals and corporates, there was a lot of liquidity in the market. So we preferred raising money from the open market rather than raising from the banks. And one more thing, what is important from the issuer perspective to bring down the cost is the credit rating and the reputation of the company. As our credit rating is A negative, and that helped us to issue CPs within the range of 5.5 to 7%. So there was two portions of it. We raised 180 days CP and we raised 270 days CP. So 180 days we got at 5.5%, and 270 days we got at 7%. So that one is there. And the is health liquidity market, and there are companies someone is looking at working capital in other means.
Naria,
Yes,
I'm sure we could hardly hear the last statement you made. Please, could you repeat that?
So lastly, I mentioned that if someone wants to raise money for their short-term requirements or working capital requirements, looking at the present situation, there is a lot of liquidity in the market. So you can just go out and raise CP rather than raising money from any other, compared to any other means. That will be much more cheaper today.
All right. Thank you very much for that, Narayan. Clearly, we can see that you're benefiting from the commercial papers market, and we hope you continue to tap into that market.
Yep.
The next person that I would like to share our own experience from our company is Shola. Shola, please, could you share with us your experience as well?
Certainly, Tosin. Please confirm that you can hear me clearly.
Loud and clear.
Perfect. So just follow up on what Narayan and the others have said and start off with the documentation. From our experience, yes, at the beginning, the documentation takes some time, especially if there's some things that you're not familiar with. So getting a rating and putting all the other processes in place, that may take some time. But the positive side to this is it's one-off. So you do it at the beginning of the program, you set it up, and going forward, you then have a quick access to funds because it doesn't really take that much time. The only concern that you then have is how liquid the market is. For us, it's been a beautiful addition to our portfolio because it gives you cheaper financing than your bank financing. It cannot replace your bank financing, but it helps you balance your cost of financing from the banks and then from the market. So documentation should not be the deciding factor because you do that at the beginning of 3 years, and for the next 3 years, it's not something that really takes up any significant amounts of time. On the pricing and on the cost, what we have found for us is that because you're pricing off the treasury bills, it is more than likely to be cheaper than the financing from the banks. As I said, it doesn't replace the financing from the banks because there's a bit more flexibility that you might get with the banks, but it helps you balance the total financing that you need. You know, when you look at the cost to the commercial paper, I guess it depends on the size of the commercial paper and how often you use it, but the all-inclusive cost is, well, I mean, for us, has been in the 1%, 2%, barely up to 2%. When you add that to the cost of the raising the funds on the market, it's still cheaper than if you were going to get it from the banks. So from a cost point of view, it's best to do your cost benefit, look at how much your all-in cost is and the cost of alternative financing. And then you see that when you put in all the parameters that you need to put into your financing decision, it's a very valuable addition to your portfolio. It's not I wouldn't say you can finance your entire operation with commercial papers only, but certainly it's a very valuable addition to your short-term financing. And you can use it as multiple times within a year. So you can have a 90 days issue at the beginning of the year. And while that is running, if you think you need a 180 days, you can, go back into the market for that. But it's always important to balance that, with your own cash flow projections as well, because as we would all know that having a debt when suddenly you have cash could be frustrating because you're paying interest costs when you don't require it. So all in, balancing it's a valuable addition to your portfolio.
Thank you very much, Shola. I'll suspend the last person, that's Ishmael, to a later time. I would like us to touch on, because it's important that we redirect this conversation to the SMEs. And I would like Jumoke, to share our own experience and the plans that, FMDQ is making to, bring on board the SMEs. Everybody here on this panel and everybody listening, the participants, you would all agree with me that the SMEs are the bedrock of any viable or growing economy. In the US, in Europe, they believe largely, and they have policies that would always engender promotion, of the SMEs, growth. Right now, with what the market has presented in terms of pricing opportunity and, financing opportunity, we know that the SMEs can tap into the CP market. So what can we do collectively as operators, or what can we do as regulator, FMDQ, to create an environment for SMEs to participate in the CP market? They have huge financial requirements. And most of these guys, they go to the banks and maybe to the loan sharks, to do their financing, their funding requirements. With the benefits that commercial papers market present, okay, what can we do to bring on board those, category of issuer, the SMEs? Jumoke?
Okay, thank you once again, Tosin. And I think it ties very nicely into some of what we discussed previously. I mean, even with the recent Company and Allied Matters Act that has just been signed into law, a lot of opportunities of smaller type companies has been created, which of course we're also looking at. And we expect that in some form in the near future, medium to near term, there'll be some impact on regulation. Regulation needs to evolve as market evolves, definitely. But then let me bring it back to speaking to SMEs accessing the market within the current regulatory framework. And I think there's still opportunities for them. And we have seen, again, one or two capital market operators being innovative, being forward, being creative to create that access for them. Of course, there's several requirements with regards to size, balance sheet size, ratings, and the likes that the current regulatory framework requires. But that doesn't create a barrier. It actually just creates opportunity because you can have your SMEs pooled under programs that can be brought to this market. And I think the investment bankers are the ones who are very vast and more, experienced in these. Those are some of the things that securitization helps you to achieve. You take the focus off just the balance sheet of the entity, but to the payment structure for the CP, the CP or the cash being raised in the market. Those are opportunities and ways how the SMEs and the small type companies who are in the market today can access the market. And like I said, we do have one or two who have, engaged with the exchange on how can we do this. And we've seen that the regulatory framework will support it. I mean, the regulation is always about protecting the ultimate investor, promoting the orderly market. Once it can be reasonably seen in the structure that is brought on how the CP is being raised, that this will be achieved, or of course, reasonably achieved. No one can give 100% assurances, but that this can be reasonably achieved through that structure. Then you would find that such products or such papers can come to the market. So I think it is again thrown back to the innovation of how we, take opportunity of the framework that already exists in the market. I see my teacher, Kobe, already smiling, and he knows that we always have these conversations that, look, the framework, the supporting environment, we are absolutely here to provide it to you every day, every time. We're here as sounding boards for you, where there are ideas, sounding board to see that it will pass through without compromising, the integrity and credibility of that market, and it will definitely fly. So I think, I compare that to the types of the CPs that we see issued in, say, the very large market like the US. you'll find that those are a lot of the types of the products. It's moved away from just the entity to what exactly is the repayment structure and how secure that is, and it can be used to tap the market. So that's what I would say with regards to how we can pull in the SMEs into the CP market for their funding needs today.
Thank you, Jumoke. That's well said. Kobe, tell us, because obviously when you were making your presentation, it was clear that there were the big boys that were enjoying or are still enjoying the benefit of this market, okay? The big boys, I'm not referring to large corporates. I'm even talking about sectorial, dimension now. And you alluded to the fact that 35% of the CP market is skewed to the manufacturing sector, and 22% to the financial services, or is it 22% to financial services and 22% to manufacturing and 35% to the financial sector? Whereas what that does is it stifles other sectors of the economy. What do you think would drive, participation from other sectors of the economy? Because we cannot just continue for us to have a well-diversified CP market. You cannot continue to have, huge participation by the manufacturing and the financial services only. What do you think we need to do collectively to encourage other sectors to participate in this market, Kobe?
Thank you, Tosin. I think the first point I'll make is that there's no stifling going on here, because there's really lots and lots of money. There's much more demand for securities than we're able to supply. And we get calls every day saying, when are you bringing the next issuer to the market? So, it's really a call out to anyone, any treasurer, any finance director out there who has not considered this as an alternative to seriously sort of turn their attention towards it. So I think that's fine. That said, the reason why the pie chart looks the way it looks, okay, I think it's also reflective of the stage of development and growth in our economy. So, those that need funding or working capital will be the ones that go out there looking for it. And there is a huge, if you look at manufacturing, if you look at sort of cement production, if you look at telecoms, those that are actively investing, or those sectors where there's going to be opportunity, you naturally will find that the players there are looking for funding, and that would just play out, in terms of who is out there, raising money. So it is what it is in terms of the how the structure of the economy and the opportunities that we see are translating to who is going out there to raise funding. That said, of course, for those that, if your question was, look, for the smaller players, because you mentioned big boys, and so presumably they are small boys. So for those small boys, right, if the question is, are the criteria that we have in place today, is it, prohibitive for them? Is it overly onerous such that they are not able to get over that? I don't think so, okay, because I think that it's more a case of those that are willing to get their house in order, put in place the governance, go through the rating process, etc., will be rewarded by investors that are willing to take, exposure. But a lot of them may still pretty much be sort of one dominant shareholder, or family owned. No, governance is not that great. They don't have proper boards constituted. So even when you talk about board resolution, will I sit in my bedroom and write it, myself, and say, this is my board resolution? So there are those things around governance and structure that needs to be addressed, which will prepare them, for this market. And so long as they are willing to go through that process, there's nothing that stops them from accessing the market. To the innovation point, which I think Jumoke brilliantly made, and I'm so glad to hear my regulator speaking in that light. There is a concept of asset-backed commercial paper where you could, via an SPV, pool together the needs of different pools, different categories of borrowers. and then you raise funding on the back of that. That is distributed to the borrowers, and then payback comes from the cash flows. So that sort of thing can be set up. But if you look at, with everything, it's usually easier to start off with the simple. We needed to get the market comfortable first. So bring Nigerian Breweries, bring MTN, bring Dufil. Then once there is that sort of appreciation for how this works, you can bring Kobe and Toasting Limited, and it will be likely supported. So I think there is that sort of natural evolution process that we'll have to go through as a market. We can't or shouldn't force it, okay? Because if you force it, if there's a breakdown, it can really set the market back, several years. But with time, we definitely will get there.
Thank you, Kobe, for that response. And Kobe, still holding on to your mic, you're still in the spotlight. So there's this particular question that has come through twice. What that means is that the person is so persistent that I need this question answered. All right, so the question is around the use of funds on, funds being raised through the commercial papers market. Is there any limitation? I know that CP, basically commercial paper, all right, is an instrument that you use to, address your working capital requirement. Your working capital requirement, i.e. means your inventories, things that, operations you want to run within a 90-day to 270-day period, and be able to churn out your operations and be able to pay back. But some people would like to know, is there any other, room for any other use outside of the working capital requirement? Is there a limitation to the use of that fund? Bear in mind that there was a time in early 2000, that the CP market, which is basically meant for what I just described, was extended that into the equities market. People used their company's name to raise CP, and they went into equities market. And we started having a lorry load of, so many commercial papers in the market. And that was one of the reasons why CBN had to come in and step in and say that, the market is abusing the use of the CP market. And it's important that we address this so we don't find ourselves, back in what it was in early 2000. And I'm happy that FMDQ is driving this. So this question is likely for you and also for Jumoke to tell us what FMDQ and you as an operator are doing to ensure that whatever these funds are for, they are being utilized for it. So
okay, so those are two sort of slightly different questions. The first is there a limitation to what you can do? And if you look at the regulation, okay, the fundamental point there is one of disclosure. Okay, so if I write in my prospectus that this money I'm raising, okay, I'm going to use it to fund I don't know, a expansion of my production capacity in my factory, okay, I can't then take that money and go and buy a fleet of Range Rovers, as an example, right? Because then you are effectively breaching the terms of your borrowing. So the most important thing is the disclosure that is made, okay, should be stuck with, should be abided by. So that's the fundamental thing. Now, the reason why most of the time people use commercial paper for working capital is because it's short-term borrowing, and you would want to finance your, if you have a short-term funding requirement, okay, you will borrow short-term to fund that, okay? And it's likewise, if you have a long-term funding requirement, okay, so if I want to build a factory, I don't go and issue 3-month commercial paper to build a factory, okay? The funding that will be suited for that will be something long-term. But that's just, being able to manage, your financing strategy appropriately as a treasurer or finance manager. But that said, there's also the concept of bridge funding. So you may go to a bank and then raise short-term funds to bridge something you're doing. So you might be wanting to issue a bond, but you need short-term funds between when you start the process and then when the bonds come, and the bonds will refinance that. Or you're raising equity and you need bridge funding. And if that's the case, that also needs to be appropriately disclosed. And if that's disclosed, then it's an investor's decision to say, okay, I'm comfortable with the fact that we're going to use this money for an acquisition. We bid for an oil rig. We need money now. We're going to buy them, and then after we'll go to the market and raise equity, or we raise 10-year bonds. Okay, so long as that is disclosed, it's not a problem. The problem has been, and alluding to the point you made, has been one of transparency, which is what happened before. People were using monies raised for all sorts of things that were not, what they communicated as the primary use of proceeds. So I think that will be my position on that point.
Thank you, Kobe. Jumoke, do you want to shed maybe some light on that from the regulator perspective?
Thank you, Tosin. And I mean, Kobe has done very good justice to that. It's not defined but implied, which is where the transparency comes into, and which is the objective of the whole quotation regulation coming from FMDQ. I mean, when you issue a CPA, you have all those documents that you've talked about, and they're publicly available to the investors, and even after you've quoted them, they're publicly available. I think the underlying principle there is, with regards to what happened and created those challenges, is when you run into not being able to pay. And obviously, Finance 101, you want to make sure you're matching what you raise debt for and the capacity to pay. I mean, when you go into a product or something that is very illiquid without having clearly defined the way you're going to make the repayment, then you're definitely going to run into trouble, which is where Kobe is talking about that transparency. Because when you're revealing your use of proceeds and even your repayment structure, you're showing the potential investor and giving them the comfort how you're going to make the repayment on this CP asset when due. So that has been the practice, and you can see that's why those documents are well defined and disclosed. Those are some of the things we make sure to look out for, that it's disclosed to the investor, that, and the transparency in the documents are disclosed to the investor to give them that kind of comfort. So yes, you can use it for what you need to, but beware that you must make the necessary repayments as at when due, and therefore the regulation captures all the minimum obligation of you as of with regards to repayment when you need to make them to the investors.
Great. Thank you, Jumoke, for that. That's very explicit. Narayan Shola, please still stay with us. We still have one or two questions that we'd like to ask you. Okay. So Ayotunde Oibe, please. We know that your firm, obviously one of the top 5, and they've participated largely in most of these deals. All right. What kind of advice would you give, to the issuer, all right, the current issuer and the prospective issuer going forward, on what would make their process and procedure of coming to the market a lot easier from the legal perspective?
Okay. Thanks again, Tosin. I think the answer to that lies in looking at the requirements. Once an issuer, or a prospective issuer in this case, has clear sight of what the requirements are, then they're kind of certain about what's required of them, and then they get the relevant guidance to achieve those. I think there's several buckets from a legal, and it'll be legal/regulatory if you'll allow me. There's several buckets. There's diligence that will be required to be done on that prospective issuer. It's not an outright intrusion into the entirety of their business operations. It's really more certain aspects that must be diligenced in order to, one, validate the disclosures that will be made in the program memorandum, and two, raise any flags or identify any disclosures that investors must be made aware of. So there's a diligence bucket. It will focus on material contracts that they might have entered into that might impede this transaction. It would focus on litigation, and to a certain extent, it will focus on their corporate status and good standing. So first advice to prospective issuers, support that diligence process, understand its purpose, and especially for those, I think you and, we've joked about it slightly and said big boys and small boys, but especially for those who might be in the small boys bucket, in the sense that not because their business size is small or that the numbers are small. After all, to do a CP, you must raise at least 100 million. So you are not a small boy in terms of your business per se, but really in terms of your governance. That due diligence will help you understand that. I think that bucket is important. The second bucket that they must be aware of is the documentation. We've spoken about that today. I think one thing I found in my experience, and sometimes I've had to still myself and ask myself which side I'm on, there's only one law firm in a CP issuance. And sometimes it gets tricky. I've had an issuer say, when we were on that call, why were you supporting what Kobe and Stanbic were saying? Aren't you my lawyer? And then I have Kobe telling me, look, Ayo, you've done this too many times. Why are you, don't you understand that I must get that kind of indemnity? I'm an arranger dealer. So there is that, I don't want to call it a conflict, but there is that tugging of the solicitor that happens to me. And you can't outrightly tell the issuer, well, I'm not quite your lawyer. You don't want to say that. You also don't want to tell Kobe that you're not. So you have to find that balance. And that balance is found when you think of the fact that the documents are standardized and when you can explain to the issuer from the perspective of the market, what FMDQ is looking to see, what investors will care about, because the investors don't meet with the issuer in terms of sign the agreements with the issuer. The arranger dealer is that person in between them. So I think prospective issuers should also understand that when we're negotiating those documents, it's not so much as not taking their side, it's ensuring that the document will pass muster from an investor perspective, from a regulatory perspective, and generally in keeping in terms of what we do in the market. Third bucket for prospective issuers, third bucket of advice is disclosure. Maybe Kobe can speak to this more than I, but again, another tug that I find is that balance between that memorandum. It's either an info memo or when you establish a program, we call it a program memorandum. The balance has to be found in that document, serving as, on the one hand, a marketing document where the issuer wants to say, I'm fantastic, I'm this, I'm the best thing since sliced bread, and also serving as a disclosure document where you, the lawyer, wants to ensure that disclosures are made, risks are called out, and therefore investors understand. Again, interesting conversations around, I don't like how you have written this risk factor. It sounds ominous. People won't want to touch my paper. And then you're also trying to make them understand that there are certain levels of disclosure, below which one must not go. Rating is another one. I think Kobe has spoken to that. I don't want to repeat it, but one, you can't do the deal without it. Two, you better have your house in order because you must have an investment grade rating. Three, it does take quite some time because of what its outcome means for you and for the market and for the comfort that all participants will take in dealing with you. So it takes its time, and you find that the rating agencies will have to do their work, and they would look to us for legal opinions as regards the efficacy of the structure that has been put in place in order to then have that rating done. You would need to, if you're trying to get monies from the PFAs. I think those are the key buckets from a legal regulatory perspective. I've heard some people complain, Kobe, and this is for you and FMDQ. Why is 100 million the minimum? Is there an answer I can give them? Maybe you can help us. They've asked me, so what if I need only 70 million? What if I need only 80 million? They've called us snobs. I should let you know. Some smaller people have said, why so snobbish? Why can't it be, why 100 million? So that's something that I want Jumoke to be aware of. And these might be otherwise competent or otherwise good issuers who are asking why it has to be 100 million, and you send them back to the bank who will quickly give them their 50 or whatever they want. So that's another thing I see often. Issuers, prospective issuers, my last point, be patient with the process because like I keep saying, the outcome would make it worth your while. But those 4 or 5 heads or categories would be my advice to issuers not to be, to remain undaunted, because at the end of it, and we've heard issuers speak today, and so we know that it's not, we're not just paying lip service to what we say. So those would be my key buckets of advice or guidance to prospective issuers. To say.
Thank you very much for that, Ayotunde. I appreciate that. Unfortunately, we are running out of time. It's amazing how we spent almost 2 hours on this call. It shows the extent of the discussion and how rich and interactive this discussion has been, and very interesting as well. But before we round up, it's important that we hear from, the General Manager, Corporate Treasury from MTN. Is Ishmael on this call? Ishmael, please just give us a minute of your time and share with us your experience before we round up this session.
Okay, so thank you, Tosin. I think from our own side, our experience was that of much of collaboration, and with both with the regulator and everybody, and we got to a point where as I think as one of those that just issued on the FMDQ exchange as one of the first telco company, one of the things you find out is you have to go through experiences of explaining the dynamics of your industry, the way it's seen, because sometimes there are things that are specific to industry which relates to turnaround time. And when I mean a turnaround time is the lead time it takes for you to not only manufacture the inventory offshore and then bring it in and integrate it to your network. So ours is much, much longer than that of more than that of a manufacturing firm. So you have to get them to understand the intricacies of the metrics you look at in your own industry. So those are the things that come out of to play, and it's about that education. It's about understanding. It's also about getting the relevant stakeholders across. I mean, for us, we wanted 50 billion naira. The market was oversubscribed by 400 billion naira. So we came back within the space of 24 hours, worked with our directors and upped the game. And it was the biggest bank for a corporate debut issuance. And for us, we saw the range in between of an average of 5.7 on cost. Everybody has talked about diversification of funding sources. Fine, we got that, and it also helped us lower our finance costs. But one of the things that, I mean, we've been on this discussion with FMDQ for almost 5 years, and we wanted to work first. And working for us was, so when we touched the equity market, the market became comfortable with our business, and our performance. So when we came to the debt and capital market, it was just it was a normal thing for the special investors, and we got a lot of waivers from FMDQ. We worked with them. We were able to cross some red tapes and things like that. I think for me, that's one of the things we enjoy. Looking forward for us is what are the new things we can do in that space. So one of the things we are trying to do is also work with FMDQ to hopefully develop like a telecoms curve, where other telecoms companies that will come will price off. Also come and work with them to deepen with regards to things like products, like syndicated note issuance facility and things like that. So those are the things that will help us work going forward. And I think the beauty of a commercial paper is that it helps you to smoothen your cash flows. Yeah, it helps you to smoothen your cash flow. It helps you to ensure that you have adequate headroom. Even if you don't need the money, you can just raise it, keep it somewhere. And if you have articulated all your CapEx program and all those things, it helps to jumpstart the process as quick as possible. So for us, our testimonials costs have been reduced, access to funding has been diversified. But of great importance to us is anybody knows, I mean, Coco will tell you that for capital to be effective and efficient, you have to be able to retain it, respect capital, re-attract that capital over and over. And that way you begin to see these numbers we're looking for. And we're also trying to see how the market can be deepened from the point where those instruments can be commoditized, either via a platform, USSD, blockchain technology, and things like that, to help drive that commoditization downwards. And that will help build price discovery. And people will be able to understand how the risk that are attendant to any business is priced appropriately. Even looking at, when we looked at our ratings and comparing to some corporates, we raised our loans far cheaper than corporates who had a better rating than us. So it is the belief of the people, it's the belief of the market, and the strength and trust of your performance that actually helps to give you a better pricing, because price should be a reflection of your risk that is associated with you and your future performance of your business. So for us, it's been an absolute testimony. We'll continue to work with FMDQ. We'll continue to work with the stakeholders to also ensure that we optimize our funding costs, diversify them, and become a more profitable business. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was very elaborate. I said 1 minute and you spent about 3 minutes. I'm going to take you up on that outside of this session. Thank you very much, everybody. I was hoping that I would give everyone, all the panelists, 30 seconds to just say a final word, but I just have about 4 minutes to get out of here. So maybe we have to suspend that. All right. I'll call on Tayo Onodele, right, to give us the closing remarks and vote of thanks.
Thank you very much, panelists, and thank you to our participants. I'm sure you will agree with me that it's been a thought-provoking session, and with all the experts coming together to kind of make sure that the CP product is no longer esoteric. I think that's one of the views that we need to really look at to attract more people. We need more players in the market, whether you're talking of trading or at the issuer level or the primary market level. One thing I also had, which I think I should mention before going into the vote of thanks, will be about the fact that education is quite key. And I think this subcommittee is actually working a lot on that, and you'll find that that's the E in the acronym of our subcommittee, the IIE. So to a large extent, we will be working on that. The more people are informed, the more they will be attracted to the market and embrace the product. One thing that also got me thinking was, are you saying that about 3 trillion, or if I go to Tosin's projection, 4.5 trillion by next year, would be sitting on banks or financial institutions' balance sheets compared to what we have now? If we had not have FMDQ go back to central bank to say, look, let's not throw the baby away with the bad water, because it was a product that was genuinely needed and we still need it. So the more people understand it, I want to believe that the turnover and the sizing of the market will go up in leaps and bounds and may start to rank at par with what we see on the bond market side. So be that as it may, I would like to express appreciation to everybody. The program, I believe, is successful, and I'm sure you'll all agree with me. I want to especially thank participants who had to bear with us because we had to postpone the program. It should have happened actually in October, but because of the protest, the Lekki shooting, and all over the nation, we had to postpone it. And when I checked on the dashboard and I saw that we even have over 100 people participating, it gladdened my heart to say that surely there is a lot of willingness. And I'm sure these are people of diverse background, different sectors. So I'm believing this session will achieve the objective, or one of the objectives, of making sure that more people will be more inquisitive to say that we want to know more about the market. So quite frankly, this product is such that if there is any entity that is not willing to be disciplined, that the commercial paper market is not for you, especially from the issuer side of the business, because of all the done. What we've also talked about in this subco has been the fact that some corporates do not want to reveal a lot about their documents or records, which you need to have transparency. But the minute you want to hide anything, you won't be able to go for a rating, which is an essential ingredient if you are coming to the market. But be that as it may, I would like to say thank you to everyone, especially the people that are helping us in the background, the whole committee. I want to say a big thank you, and we look forward to seeing you again. Thank you, Tosin, for being the coordinator and the moderator.
Thank you very much, Tayo, for the vote of thanks. That was well said. On a final note, for our participants that have been, shooting a series of questions to us, for those of us that we've not had their questions answered, please bear with us. We will attend to those questions. We'll send you some response via your contacts. It's unfortunate that we cannot take in all the questions. And for me, that demonstrates the fact that this is a very topical issue that people would like to, ask questions and get clarification on the way forward. Thank you once again to all the panelists. Tayo, thank you very much. And let us have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.
Thank you and bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Stay safe, everyone.
Thank you and bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Look forward to see you again. Bye.